Hello, everyone. Welcome back for part 2 of our FinOps event. The format will be the same. Now I will give a 20-minute presentation, and then we go back to an interview with Koen and Diederik, in this case, followed by a Q&A session. Okay, so let's start with the theoretical part. I'm going to talk about a FinOps approach, and I have the tagline, why FinOps is not like climbing Mount Everest. This is, of course, a tagline to build up a story and make you curious about what's coming. But I have a main goal, and the main goal is that everybody in the audience has at least somewhat of an understanding how to tackle this FinOps story. Where do you start? How do you do this? Okay, let's dive into it. And the first thing I'm going to do is a bit theoretical. I'm going to do a lot of name dropping on FinOps terms. It's okay if you don't understand everything. Just try to follow along the story. This is a typical cloud workload lifecycle. Something starts with an ID. That ID or a business requirement goes to a design phase. Something is designed, it's implemented, it goes into a run stage, and at a certain point in time, it's over, it's end of life, that workload, that application is powered off. Basic IT stuff. Let's put some FinOps activities on this slide. FinOps activities. So after the ID, you come to the design phase, and FinOps comes directly to the point there. You have to design with cost efficiency in mind. So you want FinOps people around the table there. Then you do some cost modeling, which means estimating how much this workload will cost, which feeds into budgets, forecasts. Okay, then you go to an implementation phase, where you implement things like technical things like tags and budget alerts and auto power on and power off, technical FinOps thing, but you have to implement them in this phase. Then you go to a run phase. Your application is running, it's consuming, it's costing money. It's important to have anomaly detection at this point. But you can look at optimizing, buying prepaid commitments, reservations, optimizing the workload, technical, right sizing, things like that. But now comes the tricky part. So you have a run cost in the cloud. By doing optimizations, that cost goes down. You have to have a mechanism that feeds back into the budgeting and forecasting. Otherwise, and that's super different from traditional IT, where you have the cost and you spend the money, CapEx. But now you have this fluctuating cost, and it's not only going up, it's also going down, and you have to report it back to the right people, to the right teams. And at the end of the life, you decommission the resources. Technical FinOps story. No worries if you don't understand everything here. Okay, some other FinOps things you want to do. Once something is running, you want to show back or even charge back the cost to the product teams or the business units. But you also want to be able to distribute shared costs. In every environment, there will be shared costs. Systems utilized by multiple business units. How do you do this? Difficult one to tackle. Everything you do, you want to measure it, check for compliance. Easy example, tagging. You need to know, our budget set, is the tagging set? You measure, you check for compliance, and you make this information back available. From the beginning, everything you do, these are not one-off exercises. You can do them as a one-off exercise. An optimization exercise is a good example, but what you want to do as an enterprise is embed them in recurring workflows, recurring processes. And while doing that, making owners accountable. And the culture thing of FinOps, which was touched on before, during the entire workload lifecycle, reflect on the cost versus the value, which is, as I said, a culture thing. Difficult. There are a lot of things on this slide. I hope you can feel that it becomes more complex. Your cloud provider, they will come out with new services regularly. Your cloud provider, they will come out with new payment models, flipping everything upside down. It's a complex story. I hope I didn't lose everybody. I used this story at customers after the high-level introduction, to make FinOps, that's one goal of this slide, a bit more tangible. I hope now you all see it's actually very concrete in real life. But for this event, I'm using this slide, a bit of name dropping, to confuse people, just to show that actually, while FinOps is not like climbing Mount Everest, you should all now have the feeling that we're up against a huge mountain. Where are we going to start? We're looking at Mount Everest. Okay. An approach. So we have an easy 4-step approach, how to climb that mountain, with 4 phases. The first one is the research phase. And it's about reading into the topic, but in an enterprise context, it actually means something different. What I mean with this is, you need to figure out where FinOps has traction within the company. And usually that's a person or a team. That person can quickly become a team. But as with all stories, somebody needs to do it. Somebody needs to believe in it, and somebody needs to drive it. So the FinOps driver, I depicted him as a unicorn here, which is a rare and special creature. We touched upon that earlier, that the FinOps profile is a rare and special creature. But it's also a unique creature within an organization because it has the possibility to collaborate in a broad manner with all the business units. It's a fun position to be in, but it's a unicorn position. You're bringing a new story, an exciting story. You need to get people on board. So the research is about finding where the traction is within the company and with who. Who is going to drive the story, spread the word, evangelize FinOps. First phase. Second phase, you build a plan. Don't we love that in IT, building plans? And there are many frameworks you can use to build your plan. There's the one from the FinOps Foundation, but every major cloud provider has its own cost management framework. For me, the key is the fact that every organization is different and you need to choose something that works for you. You identify work streams that are important for your company. And you can choose how deep you want to go down into the rabbit hole. Let me give an example. A work stream could be, let's make costs and usage visible. That's quite a high-level work stream, but that could be okay for you as a company. But you can go deeper, because to achieve that, you can have a work stream pure on cost allocation, tagging elements, pure on the reporting, showback mechanisms, data normalization, gathering all the data. So you see, you can choose how high level you want to be or how deep you want to go and how specific you want to design your work streams. But it's important to have this skeleton of work streams in place. What you then do is define goals. Because you need to know where you want to go. Have that discussion. What do we actually want to achieve with FinOps? And I personally like this, the crawl, walk, run method very much, because it doesn't say anything about time. It's just a chronologic order. And it makes sense, because you don't want to run before you can walk. So you will define goals for each work stream via this methodology. And there's a big advantage of doing it like this, because what you will find is, if you start doing FinOps in your organization, people will notice you and you will get questions. And you will be forced, you will get questions that are way ahead of you. And it's difficult to tell people, I hear your question, but we're not doing that now. But if you have a framework like this, you can say, okay, I hear your question, but what you want to do, for example, the shared cost, is too far. We're not there yet. We're not ready to tackle that problem, but it's on our agenda. It's on our roadmap. So you satisfy everybody within your company. You have a plan, and you can slowly build up towards more maturity in each work stream. Let's have a look at a concrete example. Again, the shared cost, because I think it's a good one. A crawl goal could be simply the ability to identify shared costs. We know what are the shared costs. Seems easy, but in an enterprise context, achieving this is already difficult. Just pinpointing these are our shared costs. In the next stage, you can then move towards a world where you are able to distribute those shared costs based on a repartition key. Let's say we just split it evenly across all the departments. The dream, the run goal, would be to split the cost, distribute the cost based on real usage. So every department is paying for that system exactly what they're consuming. Difficult. That's why it's a run goal. But that could be the goal. But that's my point. The plan you build is different for every company. Maybe you don't have the need to reach that goal and you're just happy with the ability to identify shared costs. It depends on your organization, how it's structured financially, but you build some sort of a plan. Let me go to a pilot. I was looking for a visual, how do you do a visual with a pilot, and I was explaining what a pilot means in the FinOps world, and somebody said to me, that's like the Wim Hof method. I don't know who knows Wim Hof. Wim Hof has a method. It's about being more healthy, stronger. And you don't have to know the method, but you will probably know the image where people take an ice bath together in group. It's one of the things he does in some sort of a workshop. And you see that image of somebody sitting 20 minutes in an ice bath, and it's spectacular. But what you don't see on that picture is that before everybody goes into the ice bath, you need to put your hand in the water to see how your body reacts. Those people are closely monitored, and that's to get rid of or be sure that nobody will have a heart attack or something like that. The same applies to FinOps. You're not throwing your entire organization into the bath. No. You're feeling the temperature. You're checking where are your pain points. You do some pilot projects. You need to identify pilot stakeholders. That can happen in the research phase. But it's not a big bang. And if you do that, you gather some feedback. You improve what you do until you're confident to go big within your organization. And then you formally launch the FinOps program, but you will have sponsors already. You will have learned already. Okay, this is all preparation. Now let's enter the run state of FinOps. And the quote from Simon Sinek is a good one because it sparks experimentation, iteration, failure, trying again. And it's the same idea with FinOps. And you see there's a wheel that turns around, and that's important. And let me make that wheel more concrete, because you will go through a pattern. We've identified a pattern you will go through if you move through that wheel many times. So what you always do is, what's the situation now? What's in front of us? You discover and document what you find. Then you use this information to optimize, to design how you would like it to be. You do brainstorm sessions and you have your output validated. Super important. After this, when you have your design, you put it into practice in an operate phase, which in turn generates new information. And you're doing that loop. Okay, so now imagine your work streams. You have many of them. Your crawl walk goals. And as I said, there's no implication on time. That's entirely up to you as an organization, how fast you want to turn those wheels. It's not one wheel. For every work stream, you do this wheel all the time. You have many wheels turning, and you can choose how fast they turn. That's how you operate in a run phase. And by doing this, you will mature in each work stream and become better and better, reach your crawl, walk run goals. Okay, so bringing this home to the initial question, why FinOps is not like climbing Mount Everest. Let's have a look at climbing Mount Everest. How would you approach that? You would do your research, read a book, mountaineering, be prepared. You come up with a plan. You plot your route, do the logistics, you set up a team, you do the plan. Mount Everest sure isn't your first mountain. You do some pilot projects, at least I hope, in the Alps or wherever. You test, and now you must be thinking, Sam, it sounds like climbing Mount Everest doing FinOps. Well, the difference is here. If you climb Mount Everest, you go to the top, you plant your flag, you go back down, and then you're finished. You go back down. That's when it's finished, back in base camp. And it's over. It's a tick in the box. FinOps doesn't work like that. FinOps is something you continue doing. You keep maturing. And maybe you reach a point where you as an organization, where you notice our teams, they are responsible, they're accountable. And everybody's thinking about the value versus cost. Well, that's when you succeeded. When this culture is there and it's super embedded in your day-to-day processes. That's why, in conclusion, my statement is that the end game of FinOps is that we no longer talk about FinOps. It's just part of daily business. Okay, thank you. This brings us to the interview section.
So Koen, welcome back. When we look at the FinOps program at Ahold Delhaize, let's start with what is in scope of the FinOps program?
That's a very wide question. First of all, we're at the Black Sea region, meaning that's already 5 countries. Mm-hmm. One of our goals has been set forward is that we will provide the FinOps as a service for those 5 countries. Make their invoice from, at this point in time, Azure, really visible and tangible, so that they know what they are going to consume. That's the first part. The second part of your question is, of course, today our focus is only on Azure. We have our main deployments, or the vast majority of our deployments, into the Azure cloud. But when we design, we always take in the back of our minds the multitude of the different flavors that exist. We know that currently we're looking for IaaS in Azure, but we are also preparing for the SaaS and PaaS in Azure. But we don't only talk about Azure, we also look at the Google Cloud platforms and other service providers, and how we can integrate them in a later state in this FinOps baseline, let's say. So that's in rough the scope in the 2-folded flavors that we see it.
Mm-hmm. And how did you structure the program?
Well, before going into the structure, let me take you on a small 2-minute story about our journey. Mm-hmm. So how we got together. So first of all, we have, as already mentioned, 4 years that we're busy with the cloud migration. Our company is evolving into a cloud organization. And at a certain point in time, okay, we're confronted with the costs, and what's next? I took now the position to start reading about what is FinOps, and I created a document where I first wrote down what are the challenges that I have, what do I know or see that we already have in place, showback, cross-charging, or what I don't have in place, and that's what I then called the challenges. What do we need to solve as problems, making people aware about these new cost models that are coming. And this we grouped in a document with also a kind of priority list. Out of there, we set together, and just to be correct, this is a story that started in September of last year, the creation of that document. I think during the month of October, we had contact with each other and we discussed about this document. And then end of October, 45 Degrees came back with a proposition on how we would tackle it. Like already explained by Sam, we started with the discovery phase. Not research phase, we called it discovery phase. And there we identified the 15 capabilities that we see fit for our organization that we require. That goes indeed from cross-charging up to the level of the showback, which reports need to be created, into the tagging strategy that needs to be determined in order to find back the bits and pieces that come together to form a function. And last but not least, also the full finance integration of the process and procedures. Because we can do FinOps, but if our finance team is not on the same plate with us, not in the same bath with us, we will not change anything. We will not change the culture, and we will not be able to proactively manage the costs that come out of the cloud. Now, after we defined the 15 capabilities, we went to the next phase. As Sam explained, we identified a crawl, a walk, and a run phase for each one of them. And then at the end, we built a kind of roadmap around it. When do we try to tackle this capability or that capability? But also the link between the capabilities. If you don't have a tagging strategy in place, you will not be able to create a report. Or you will create a report without proper content in it, or you will not be able to explain the content. So that's a bit the approach that we're taking at this point in time. Now, as mentioned, we started in September by creating the document. Some people say that I'm high demanding, but I am proud on what my team already has achieved, and that is by end of this quarter, we will be able to send out to our different country leads a report on their consumption of the first quarter of this year. And that's our next milestone, and that will be a challenging one with some pushback understandings and a lot of questions, but I'm really looking forward to this journey.
So you mentioned the finance people involved. What roles are involved in the broader FinOps program today at Ahold Delhaize?
Well, you have the literature, as I already explained, and one of the questions in the first part was that, okay, you have a FinOps lead, a practitioner, and the advisor. Well, we as an organization don't have it. So I just went spreading the word, discussing with people during coffees, and then I found different people that were interested in my story, that were also looking for, but what does this function or application now cost? And the first team that I have in mind, the first person that I have in my team is my IT finance person. Because that's the person that I currently work with my investment proposals, with my business cases. If there are projects that need to be defined, we sit together to build the full financial picture. And I explained to her, well, we're going to change fully the story on how we work. CapEx, OpEx, we're going to remove the CapEx part. No longer investments, but you will see an OpEx one. And she got interested into it. And she also quite quickly understood that the financial processes, as we know today, going from cash flow, P&L, budget, and forecasting, they are going to change. How? We cannot identify yet, but that we will have an impact, that's sure. That's my first person, very key in the story. Second person is my cloud foundation engineer. My cloud foundation engineer is the one that understands in depth the technology of the cloud. He knows what a VM is, but also what a resource is. He understands what a tag is, but is also able to modify that tag for you or build new tags. Because in the beginning, we didn't have a tagging strategy in our FinOps department, meaning that we were not able to single out the consumption of one application or one country. So we set forward a requirement within our crawl stage of the tagging strategy. We need to be able to determine the budget owner. And that foundation engineer, that cloud foundation engineer, made it happen. Were there consequences? Yes, but that's something else. So that's my second person. And the third one is one of my enterprise system engineers. Someone that is really not involved in the modern way of thinking in the cloud. It's someone with a background of P-series, AX, DB2, and Linux. But he is bringing a complete different view at the table, which is quite valuable. For him, it's just logic that you power off systems, or that you have shared components, or that you are able to mix and match different components to come to a resolution on an enterprise grade. He also has the reality in him that he's stating, well, it's good that you think about volatile workloads, but if I look at an enterprise-grade system, it's not volatile. Some capabilities, functions, applications from our business are not cloud-ready. We're able to put them in the IaaS. But in the IaaS, that's another way of working than in a SaaS and a PaaS. So that's my team today. Very proud, again, that we're able to report out after merely 4 months of work. And what the future will bring, well, I would say let's host this event again in 12 months and have that discussion.
Well, let's challenge you still a bit on that. So by the end of Q1, you would like to show the country leads like a first version of their costs. But on a higher level, what are your expected results?
Well, I once described it. For me, the Valhalla would be is that if I have a tool that is working with artificial intelligence, that is able to take those new services that pop up, or those new billing methods that come up, or new discounts that come up, and automatically puts it into my reporting and shows me if you engage on this service or if you engage on that type of service, you will have a gain of that much. And that I'm able to take that story towards my business and engage on optimization discussions. Optimization discussions up to the level of really re-engineering the platform behind it. So that would be the end game, in my opinion. Reality is going to be that we're able to really go into FinOps, that I'm able to have on a monthly basis discussions with my business, have a discussion about the cost versus value, making sure that we're able to report on it, but also guaranteeing to my legal department, guys, we're not doing weird things with the data and story in the cloud, because once new things pop up, it comes up to the radar with alertings. I'm able to guide my vendor management team or sourcing team. My dear team, I've seen an increase of that type of resources in the last months, or a decrease. Go do with it in the negotiations. But also to my finance team, that I'm able to tell, dear finance, this is how we see the evolution of the last 6 months, 12 months of the costs. This is how we predict it to be. And then with the input of our business, that needs to be able to state, well, we expect more workload there and less workload there, that we're able to build a semi-predictable cost for the cloud. So that would be, for me, the desired versus real.
It's not the Valhalla, but it's where you want to get.
Yes.
So, a last question. Based on your journey of the last months, based on the learnings that even started before the journey, obviously, because there was a phase before that, what would you recommend to our audience, which still needs to start climbing the mountain?
First of all, don't be scared about the mountain. Don't be scared about the vast majority of work that lies in front of you. Yes, we gave a lot of information, technical, non-technical, philosophical, up to the level that you really need to try to change the culture of your company with a lot of stakeholders. But what I do find very interesting with FinOps is that it is a modern workload. A modern workload that allows to work in very small pieces, in an agile way of working, in sprints, and even those small steps. Again, I come back to my example. After 4 months, I'm able to report out to my country leads their consumption in the cloud, that you're able to get those things very fast. In all honesty, it is a 24-month journey at this point in time, but those very small steps are crucial, and don't be scared of it. it's fun. On the other side, do expect a pushback. Do expect a lot of people not understanding the new language that cloud and cloud financials is bringing. In all honesty, we talk about enablements, subscriptions, landing zones, and all the other nice technical things, but they are not always quantifiable from a cost point of view. You'll need to learn that new language as well. For me, and now maybe you're going to tell me that I'm a dinosaur, I was formed as an engineer on the ZOS mainframe, and now I am talking about FinOps. So I've also tried to invent myself and understand this new world. It is just fun and challenging.
Thanks, Koen. That sounds like a nice way to wrap up this part of the interview. Let's go back to Q&A. People following online can type in their question, just like in part one. Anybody in the room that has a question? Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the pushbacks that you foresee or that you expect? Because there are different countries and different agendas maybe also.
Yeah, I need to repeat the question, so I learned from part one. So the question is, can you elaborate a bit, Koen, on the pushbacks that you encountered?
Yeah. So the pushback that you encountered, for example, is currently, and I think a lot of companies are doing this, your IT services are being cross-charged based on a certain repartition key. That can be sales, that can be users, but as long as the cost is divided, we're happy. Suddenly, you're able to tell to your finance people, well, I'm able to give you the cost per type of function or application. And suddenly, the responsible of the warehouse management is being reflected with a cost of his warehouse management system in the cloud. And even worse, you're able to allocate the cost. This one is specific for that country, this one is specific for that country, and those two other countries, they no longer need to pay because they don't use this service. So you see that the budget discussions are going to change. Now, keep in mind, I always took the position, FinOps is not about decreasing the cost. Please do not think that you will decrease your costs with FinOps. That's not your goal. Your goal is, or at least mine is, to correctly allocate my costs at the consumer basis, meaning that you take an application, you look who's using it, and then you allocate the cost correctly. But if you're into a culture that everything is into one bucket, you have a nice repartition key, which is in favor or accepted by most of them, and suddenly you're able to show that this country, it's not using the technology as it should be, and is consuming a lot more compared to the other ones, we should cross-charge more to that country. That's one of the pushbacks. Now, if you go into that debate, one advice is immediately propose them the mitigation action. A very easy thing is that if a country causes a peak in the workload, which you then need to scale for, give them immediately the advice, well, we know that your cost is higher. This is due to how you're using the functions and the systems. But if you spread your workload, again, if feasible, you can decrease the cost for you as well. So you come on one side with the bad story, telling them, well, you're going to be cross-charged more. But on the other side, you give them immediately the optimization. You're able to decrease your costs severely as well. So those are the budgets. That's an example of a budget pushback that I received.
So tying into that, question from the online audience. It's actually multiple questions. What do you expect as a return on investment? You pretty much covered that, but then it goes into how long will it take to be break even? And what would you said, I'm not doing it for the reduction, but still there is a reduction part. How do you see that over the coming period/years, the question says?
Good question, and honestly, I didn't really think about that at this point in time. currently, I'm looking at it as an investment to make sure that we're able to manage this new way of costs compared to what we're doing today. So my driver is really not business case driven, investment driven. So it's a good question. I'll take it along and I'll keep it in the back of my head, and maybe in a future state I'll be able to answer on it.
Fair answer. Another question coming from the online audience. Sam, I will ask you the question. How do you train FinOps expert to become more senior?
How do you train a FinOps expert to become more senior? So this is taking into account that we already have a FinOps expert.
Mm-hmm. Or well, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
How do you start with the journey?
Well, as a person, you need to understand cloud technology quite well, concepts. You don't need to be a cloud engineer, but you need to understand the cloud concepts and all the payment concepts in a cloud. That should be your second nature as a starting point. Next to that, you should have an interest in finance, right? Otherwise, you don't need to start in a FinOps journey. But to answer the question, so those are basic prerequisites, let's say, for becoming a FinOps practitioner/architect. But how do you become one? Reading, research, and then doing it. Practice makes perfect. So that's the answer I can give here. Yeah.
Maybe elaborate a little bit. That there is a certification path
Indeed.
that does exist.
Indeed. Okay, so yeah, there is globally there is the FinOps Foundation, which is a community supported by the Linux Foundation. They're driving the story globally and providing those best practices. And it's a very interesting community. I'm glad to be part of it. There's a lot of information coming from there. But you see multiple of these initiatives popping up as well. So keep an open mind, I would say, definitely. But the good thing about the FinOps Foundation is they're very mature in their community, and they offer a certification track. So you can become an associate FinOps practitioner, and recently even a professional FinOps practitioner. So those are things that force you to learn. They also provide courses. So that's definitely a path to follow.